The alarm screamed through the bridge of the U.S. Perseverance as the ship tumbled out of the unstable wormhole. Like a stone thrown from a catapult, Captain Elena Vasquez gripped her command chair and watched the stars spin wildly across the main view screen until the navigation systems finally stabilized the vessel's status report. She called out to her crew. Lieutenant Commander David Okonkwo ran his fingers across his console and shook his head in confusion. "Captain, I have no idea where we are," he admitted with a nervous laugh. "None of these star patterns match anything in our database." The Perseverance was a battered exploration vessel carrying 47 crew members on what was supposed to be a routine survey mission. Near the outer edges of human-explored space, they had detected an unusual energy signature and decided to investigate, which turned out to be the worst decision they had made in years. The wormhole had grabbed them without warning and pulled them across the galaxy in the blink of an eye. Chief Engineer Marcus Chun stumbled onto the bridge with grease on his face and worry in his eyes. "Engines are fried," he announced. "We have maybe 30% thrust and the jump drive is completely dead." Captain Vasquez nodded calmly and turned back to the view screen. "Well, at least we are alive," she said. "Let us figure out where." Her words died in her throat as the view screen suddenly filled with ships. Not human ships. These vessels were enormous and elegant, with sweeping curves and glowing energy cores that pulsed like heartbeats. They moved with a grace that human engineering had never achieved, surrounding the Perseverance in a perfect sphere formation within seconds. Navigator Amara Diallo counted them on her screen and swallowed hard. "I am reading 67 vessels," she reported. "The smallest one is 3 times our size, and the largest is bigger than a small moon." Security Chief Roberto Reyes, who everyone called Bobby, stepped forward with his hand instinctively moving toward his sidearm before he stopped himself. "I do not think guns will help here," he muttered. The communication system crackled to life with a transmission that auto-translated through their universal linguistics program. "Unidentified vessel. You have trespassed into sovereign Veilith space," a deep and commanding voice declared. "You will surrender unconditionally or face immediate annihilation." The crew exchanged glances across the bridge. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the ship's medical officer, raised an eyebrow and whispered to Marcus. "They seem friendly," Marcus snorted quietly in response. Captain Vasquez straightened her uniform and took a deep breath before responding. "This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the United Earthship Perseverance," she said in her most diplomatic tone. "We did not intend to enter your space, and we apologize for the intrusion, but we would appreciate a chance to explain ourselves." There was a long pause before the alien voice returned, this time with a hint of confusion. "You will explain nothing," the voice commanded. "You will power down all systems and prepare to be boarded." Vasquez looked around at her crew and saw no fear in their eyes, only tired resignation. These people had survived asteroid impacts, solar flares, equipment failures, and 3 separate mutinies on other ships before joining her crew. A bunch of alien warships were just another Tuesday for them. "We will comply," Vasquez said calmly. "But I have to warn you that our food supplies are running low, so if this interrogation takes a while, we might need something to eat." The silence that followed her statement lasted nearly a full minute. Finally, the alien voice returned, sounding genuinely bewildered. "You request food?" it asked. "We've been traveling for 6 months and our last resupply was delayed," Vasquez explained matter-of-factly. "A meal would be appreciated on the command ship of the Veilith fleet." High Overseer Ketheran stood in stunned silence. He was a towering insectoid creature with 4 arms and compound eyes that could see in 12 different spectrums of light in his 300 years of service to the hegemony. He had witnessed the conquest of 47 species and the subjugation of hundreds of worlds. He had never once encountered a species that responded to threats of annihilation by asking for dinner. "Are they mocking us?" His second-in-command asked. "I do not know," Ketharan admitted. "But they are either incredibly stupid or incredibly dangerous." He studied the small human vessel on his tactical display. It was tiny and primitive. With the technology that the hegemony had surpassed thousands of years ago, the weapons were laughable and the shields were practically non-existent. Yet the creatures inside showed no fear. "Scan them," Ketharan ordered. "I want to know everything about these beings." The scans returned data that made no sense to the Valith scientists. The humans were soft and fragile with no natural armor or weapons. They breathed a corrosive gas mixture that would kill most species in minutes. Their planet of origin was a nightmare world of extreme temperature variations, tectonic instability, and an atmosphere that was slowly poisoning itself. "How are they even alive?" One scientist whispered. "More importantly," Ketharan said slowly, "why are they not afraid of us?" He made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. "Do not destroy them," he commanded. "Take them to Valith Prime for examination by the Supreme Conclave." Back on the Perseverance, the crew waited patiently as alien boarding parties entered their ship. The Valith soldiers were massive and terrifying, with chitin armor and weapons that hummed with deadly energy. Ensign Tommy Park, the youngest member of the crew at just 22 years old, watched them enter with wide eyes. "They look like giant bugs," he whispered to Bobby. "Do not say that to their faces," Bobby whispered back. "That is probably rude." The Valith commander approached Captain Vasquez and loomed over her. Clearly expecting her to cower, Vasquez simply looked up at him and smiled politely. "Thank you for not shooting us," she said. "I was worried there for a moment." The commander tilted his head in confusion. "You should be worried still," he warned her. "The Supreme Conclave will decide your fate, and they are not known for mercy." Vasquez nodded thoughtfully. "We have faced worse," she said simply. The commander did not know how to respond to that. As the humans were escorted off their ship and onto the Violath transport, they moved with a calm that unnerved every alien who watched them. Marcus Chen complained about leaving his engine repairs. Unfinished Dr. Tanaka asked if the Valith had any interesting diseases she could study. Navigator Diallo took notes on the alien ship designs with genuine academic interest, and Captain Vasquez walked with her head held high, as if she were attending a diplomatic function rather than being taken prisoner by a galaxy-spanning empire. High Overseer Ketharan watched the humans through his surveillance feeds and felt something he had not experienced in centuries. Doubt. These creatures were weak and primitive, and utterly outmatched. Yet they acted as if none of that mattered. Either they truly were insane, or they knew something that the hegemony did not. Ketharan decided he needed to find out which one it was before these strange beings caused any more confusion. The journey to Valith Prime would take 3 days. 3 days for the humans to rest, recover, and prepare for whatever came next. 3 days for the crew of the Perseverance to do what humans had always done best: adapt, survive, and make the best of a terrible situation. As the fleet jumped to faster-than-light speeds, Captain Vasquez gathered her crew in their holding cell and addressed them quietly. "Listen up," she said. "We are in unknown space, surrounded by unknown aliens with unknown intentions, and our ship is broken." She paused and looked at each of them. "So basically, this is just like the time on Mars when the colony dome cracked," she continued. "We handled that, and we will handle this." The crew nodded with grim determination. They had been through worse. They had always been through worse, and they had always survived the Valith hegemony had no idea what they had just invited into their perfect empire. They were about to learn that humans were not just another species to be conquered. They were survivors of a world that had spent 4 billion years trying to kill them, and they were very, very stubborn. The Grand Tribunal Chamber on Valith Prime was designed to intimidate. It stretched upward for nearly a kilometer, with walls of polished black stone that absorbed light and made visitors feel small and insignificant. Thousands of species had stood in this chamber over the past 12,000 years, and every single one of them had trembled before the Supreme Conclave. The crew of the Perseverance did not tremble. Captain Elena Vasquez led her people into the massive hall and looked around with genuine appreciation. "This is beautiful architecture," she remarked to no one in particular. Someone put real thought into this design. High Overseer Catharan, who escorted them personally, felt his compound eyes twitch with irritation. These humans continued to behave in ways that made no sense. The Supreme Conclave sat upon 7 towering thrones arranged in a semicircle at the far end of the chamber. Each throne held a representative of the founding species of the Valith hegemony, ancient beings who had conquered and united this corner of the galaxy long before humanity had discovered fire. The eldest among them was Thros, a crystalline entity that had existed for over 40,000 years. Thros looked like a living sculpture of light and mineral, constantly shifting and refracting in ways that hurt to watch for too long. Beside Thros sat creatures of every description, from massive reptilian warlords to delicate energy beings that floated within containment fields. All of them radiated power and authority. All of them expected the humans to grovel. "You stand before the Supreme Conclave of the Valith hegemony," the reptilian member announced in a voice like grinding stones. "We have ruled 400 star systems for 12,000 years, and we have never encountered a species as foolish as yours." Captain Vasquez tilted her head politely. "Foolish in what way?" she asked. "You entered our space without permission. You showed no fear when confronted by our fleet, and you have displayed no proper respect since your arrival," the reptilian continued. "This is either stupidity or arrogance, and neither will be tolerated." Lieutenant Commander David Okonkwo, who served as the ship's historian and cultural expert, stepped forward with a thoughtful expression. "With respect, we did not enter your space on purpose," he explained. "An unstable wormhole pulled us here against our will. So calling it trespassing seems unfair." The Conclave members exchanged glances of disbelief. No species had ever argued with them, regardless of how you arrived. The reptilian growled. "You are now subject to hegemony law, and hegemony law states that all new species must submit to evaluation and potential integration." "Integration?" The Dia Yuki Tanaka asked curiously. "What does that mean exactly?" An energy being on the conclave flickered with what might have been amusement. "It means your homeworld will be cataloged. Your population will be managed, and your species will serve the hegemony in whatever capacity we deem appropriate," it explained. "This is the fate of all who enter our domain." The humans exchanged glances, but showed no signs of panic. "That sounds like slavery with extra steps." Security Chief Bobby Reyes muttered. "It is efficient governance." Catharan corrected him sharply. "The hegemony brings order to chaos and purpose to the purposeless." Captain Vasquez raised her hand like a student in a classroom. "Before we discuss our future, could we perhaps learn more about your hegemony?" she asked politely. "We like to understand things before making decisions." The Conclave seemed genuinely confused by the request. "There are no decisions for you to make," the reptilian member insisted. "You will comply or you will be destroyed." "Of course," Vasquez agreed pleasantly. But surely it would not hurt to show us what we are complying with. The ancient crystalline being called Thros spoke for the first time, and its voice resonated through the chamber like wind chimes made of ice. "Let them see," Thros said. "Let them understand the power they face," with a gesture from one of the conclave members. The chamber filled with holographic displays. Images of vast fleets darkened the skies of countless worlds, weapons that could crack planets, fired in silent demonstrations of overwhelming force, viral. Agents reduced entire populations to dust. Singularity bombs devoured star systems. The display was meant to inspire terror. David Okonkwo watched with academic interest and raised his hand again. "Impressive," he admitted. "Could we see the casualty statistics from your last major conflict?" The conclave members paused, clearly not expecting that question. Why would you want such information? Ketharan demanded professional curiosity. David explained, "I am a historian, and I find that casualties often reveal more about a conflict than victories do." After a moment of deliberation, the conclave displayed the numbers from the hegemony's most devastating war. A century-long conflict that had nearly torn their empire apart. 2 billion dead across 100 years. The display glowed with somber pride, presenting this tragedy as evidence of the terrible costs the hegemony had paid for its dominance. The humans looked at the numbers. Then they looked at each other. The uncomfortable silence that followed made Ketharan deeply uneasy. "Is something wrong?" he asked. Captain Vasquez took a deep breath and spoke carefully. "Your most destructive war killed 2 billion over a century," she said slowly. "That is tragic, and I do not wish to diminish that suffering. But," Thros prompted, sensing there was more. "But humanity lost 70 million in a single conflict that lasted only 6 years. Vasquez continued. "And that was not even our worst century." The chamber fell absolutely silent. "You are lying." The reptilian conclave member accused. David shook his head. "I can provide documentation if you wish," he offered. "We call it World War II, and it happened less than 300 years ago. And we fought it entirely among ourselves on one planet, with weapons far more primitive than what you have shown us today." The numbers appeared on their own display. Translated from human records, 70 million dead, 6 years, one planet fighting each other. "There must be an error," Ketharan insisted. "No species could survive such self-destruction." "Oh, that was not even the close call," Marcus Chen added helpfully. "We nearly wiped ourselves out with nuclear weapons during something called the Cold War. And we almost did it again during the climate crisis. And before that, we had plagues that killed a third of our population in some regions." Daishin Tanaka nodded in agreement. "Humanity has faced extinction-level events approximately once every few generations," she explained clinically. "We keep almost dying, and then we keep not dying, and honestly it has become almost routine at this point." Thros leaned forward, crystalline form shifting with intense interest. "What kind of species wages such war upon itself and survives?" Thros asked. Marcus Chun shrugged. "The stubborn kind," he answered. The conclave members began whispering among themselves in languages the translation system could not process. Ketharan stood frozen as his entire understanding of these creatures shifted beneath him. They were not brave because they were ignorant. They were calm because they had faced worse, much worse. "Your world," Thros said slowly. "Tell us about your world." Captain Vasquez gestured to David, who pulled up images from Earth's database. "Our planet has extreme temperature variations that can shift 100 degrees within a single day in some regions," he began. "The atmosphere contains a highly corrosive gas called oxygen that our bodies require to survive. And our weather systems regularly produce storms powerful enough to flatten cities." He continued, showing images of hurricanes, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and tsunamis. The ground shakes and breaks apart unpredictably. Mountains explode with molten rock, and massive waves can destroy coastal regions without warning, he added. Also, approximately 70% of our planet is covered in water that we cannot drink, filled with creatures that view us as food. The conclave watched in growing horror. This is your homeworld? The energy being asked. This is where your species evolved? Yes, Vasquez confirmed. We call it Earth. And we love it very much. Thros made a sound that might have been laughter or might have been disbelief. You evolved on a death world, Thros said. Your entire species is calibrated for survival against impossible odds. We never really thought of it that way, Vasquez admitted. It is just home. The conclave fell into heated debate while the humans waited patiently. Some members argued that such a dangerous species should be eliminated immediately. Others suggested that humanity could be useful as soldiers or colonizers. For hostile worlds, a few simply sat in stunned silence, trying to process what they had learned finally. Thros raised a crystalline appendage for silence. We will deliberate further, Thros announced. These humans will be held for observation while we determine the appropriate course of action. Captain Vasquez nodded graciously. We appreciate your consideration, she said. And if it is not too much trouble, we really could use that meal we mentioned earlier. As the humans were escorted out of the chamber, Catharan heard the conclave erupt into argument behind him. The hegemony had conquered countless species across 12,000 years, but they had never encountered anything quite like humanity, and for the first time in his long career, Catharan wondered if the hegemony had finally met something it could not simply crush into submission. The humans walked calmly down the corridor, already discussing what kind of food they hoped the aliens might have. They seemed completely unaware that they had just shaken the foundations of a galactic empire, or perhaps they simply did not care. Asterisk. The hegemony military installation, known as Facility 7, was designed to break the will of conquered species. It contained testing chambers, psychological evaluation rooms, and holding cells that had housed thousands of prisoners over the centuries. No species had ever left Facility 7 with their spirit intact. The humans arrived with the same calm demeanor that had frustrated their captors since the moment of first contact. Dr. Yuki Tanaka actually thanked the guards for the comfortable transport. The Valith scientists, assigned to evaluate the humans, began with standard psychological assessments. They placed each crew member in isolated chambers and subjected them to tests designed to measure fear response, stress tolerance, and mental stability. The results made no sense when Navigator Amara Diallo was shown images of cosmic horrors and death. She rated her fear level as a 3 out of 10 and explained that she had seen worse things in her grandmother's photo album from the war years, when Chief Engineer Marcus Chen was subjected to extreme temperature variations. He complained that it reminded him of camping trips with his father and asked if they had any marshmallows. When Security Chief Bobby Reyes was placed in complete darkness with threatening sounds playing from all directions, he fell asleep within 20 minutes. The lead scientist, a pale creature with too many eyes named Vector, reviewed the data with growing frustration. These readings cannot be accurate, Vector insisted. No organic species should show such low fear responses. High Overseer Ketharan observed from the monitoring station and said nothing. He had watched the humans since their capture, and he was beginning to understand something terrible. They were not fearless because they were stupid. They were calm because their entire evolutionary history had prepared them for exactly this kind of situation. The scientist moved on to physical testing. Thea Tanaka was placed in a chamber that slowly reduced atmospheric pressure to simulate vacuum exposure. She remained calm throughout, controlling her breathing and following protocols. She had learned during her medical training when the pressure dropped to dangerous levels. She simply waited patiently for the test to end. You were trained for this? Vector asked afterward. All humans who work in space receive vacuum exposure training, Tanaka explained. It is standard safety procedure because accidents happen. Vector made a note that humans apparently considered the vacuum of space to be a minor inconvenience worth training for the combat evaluations. Proved even more disturbing, Bobby Reyes was placed in an arena with a Valith combat AI, a machine designed to overwhelm opponents with superior speed and strength. The AI attacked with precise, calculated strikes. Bobby dodged, weaved, and countered with movements that seemed almost instinctive within 3 minutes. He had disabled the AI using techniques the machine had never encountered. Where did you learn to fight like that? Catharan demanded. Bobby shrugged. My grandmother taught me, he said. She was a Marine, and her mother was a guerrilla fighter during the occupation of her homeland. And her mother before that survived a genocide by hiding in the mountains and ambushing supply convoys. He paused thoughtfully. Fighting is kind of a family tradition, he added after the combat test. Bobby asked if the AI needed repairs and offered to help fix it. The Valith technicians did not know how to respond. The psychological warfare tests were equally ineffective. The scientists gathered the humans together and showed them footage of conquered species, worlds reduced to ash, populations enslaved and broken. The humans watched in somber silence. This is meant to frighten you, Vector explained. This is the fate that awaits your people if you resist. Lieutenant Commander David Okonkwo raised his hand. Could we fast forward through some of this? He asked politely. I have seen similar footage in history documentaries, and while I appreciate the production value, the emotional manipulation techniques are somewhat predictable. Vector stared at him in disbelief. You have documentaries about mass death? The scientist asked. We have entire channels dedicated to it, David confirmed. Humanity has a complicated relationship with its own history. The final test was meant to be definitive. The Valith had a creature called a Kethvorin, a massive predator species that had been used to terrorize conquered populations for centuries. It stood 3 meters tall with armored hide, razor-sharp claws, and a roar that could paralyze most species. With pure primal terror, they released the Kethvorin into the testing chamber with young Ensign Tommy Park, the smallest and youngest member of the crew. The scientists expected screaming, panic, and psychological breakdown. They watched through reinforced glass as the Kethvorin charged toward the tiny human. Tommy did not run. He did not scream. Instead, he stood his ground, made himself look as large as possible by raising his arms, and shouted at the top of his lungs. The Kethvorin skidded to a halt. It tilted its massive head in confusion. It had never encountered prey that yelled back. Tommy continued shouting and slowly stepped forward, maintaining eye contact and refusing to show fear. The Kethvorin actually retreated. The scientists watched in stunned silence as the deadliest predator in the hegemony backed away from a creature half its size. When Tommy was finally extracted from the chamber, Catharan demanded an explanation. That is how you handle a charging grizzly bear, Tommy explained casually. You make noise, look big, and never run because running triggers their chase instinct. A grizzly bear? Vector repeated. Large predator from my homeworld, Tommy said. They weigh about 400 kilograms and can run faster than most humans, but they usually back down if you stand your ground. He paused and smiled. Of course, this does not work with polar bears. He added, with polar bears, you just hope you can outrun whoever you are hiking with. The scientists spent the next several hours researching Earth's wildlife. They found bears, lions, wolves, sharks, crocodiles, venomous snakes, poisonous insects, and countless other creatures that could kill humans. They discovered that humans had not. eliminated these predators. Humans had evolved alongside them. Some humans even kept the descendants of wolves as pets. They domesticated apex predators. Vector whispered in horror. They took hunting animals and turned them into companions. Tetheron reviewed the complete evaluation data and felt something he had not experienced in centuries. Fear. Not fear of what the humans could do physically, because their technology was primitive and their bodies were fragile. Fear of what they represented. The humans came from a death world where everything tried to kill them. They had evolved to face constant danger with creativity, adaptability, and sheer stubborn refusal to die. Every test designed to break their spirit had simply reminded them of challenges they had already overcome. The hegemony had conquered species through superior technology and overwhelming force, but they had never encountered a species that had been fighting for survival since the moment it crawled out of the primordial ooze. Tetheron requested an audience with the Supreme Conclave to deliver his assessment. "These humans are not brave," he reported. "They are calibrated for a level of danger that we cannot comprehend." "Explain," Thros commanded. "Their homeworld spent 4 billion years trying to kill them," Tetheron said. "Every generation faced extinction, and every generation survived. And they passed that survival instinct to the next generation." He paused to let his words sink in. "We showed them our weapons, and they compared them to their own history." He continued. "We showed them our predators, and they remembered worse. And we showed them our power, and they simply waited for us to finish. What do you recommend?" The Reptilian Conclave member asked. Tetheron hesitated before answering. "I do not know," he admitted. "But I believe that trying to break these creatures will only make them stronger." The Conclave fell into troubled silence for the first time in 12,000 years. They faced a species that could not be intimidated, and they had no idea what to do about it. Back in their holding cell, the humans shared a meal and discussed their situation. "I think we passed their tests," Captain Vasquez observed. "Were we supposed to fail?" Marcus asked. "Probably," Vasquez admitted. "But failure has never really been our specialty." The crew laughed quietly together. They were still prisoners in an alien empire. They were still outnumbered and outgunned, but they were also still alive, and for humans, that was always enough to start with. Word of the humans spread through the Velith hegemony like fire through dry grass. Within days, every species in the empire had heard stories about the strange creatures who asked for food when threatened with annihilation. Within weeks, those stories had grown into legends. Some said the humans could not feel fear at all. Others claimed they had faced gods and won. The truth was somehow more terrifying. They were simply used to surviving. The political chambers of Velith Prime erupted into heated debate as factions formed around what came to be known as the Human Question. High Overseer Tetheron led the faction, demanding immediate extermination. They cannot be allowed to find their way home, he argued before the Supreme Conclave. A species this dangerous will return with reinforcements, and we will face a war unlike anything in our history. Others disagreed. Imagine such warriors fighting for the hegemony. A minor Conclave member suggested, "We could conquer the entire galaxy with humans as our soldiers." "You cannot control something that does not fear you," Tetheron countered. "And these creatures fear nothing." The debate raged for days without resolution. Meanwhile, the humans remained in their holding cell, completely unaware that their fate hung in the balance. Captain Vasquez had organized a crew into work shifts. Some exercised to stay sharp. Others discussed theories about how to repair their ship. Marcus Chen spent hours drawing diagrams of alien technology he had glimpsed during their transfer to the facility. "If we ever get back to the Perseverance, I want to see if I can improve our engines using some of their design principles, he explained. You want to copy alien technology? David asked. I want to adapt alien technology, Marcus corrected. There is a difference. On the 5th day of their captivity, Catharan visited them personally. He dismissed the guards and stood alone before the cell, studying the humans with his compound eyes. I want to understand. Something, he said, quietly. Captain Vasquez rose from her seat and approached the barrier between them. Ask your question, she said. What do your people actually want? Catharan asked. You have made no demands, issued no threats, and attempted no escape. So what is your goal? Vasquez considered the question carefully. We want to go home, she answered. We want to tell our people what we found out here. And we want to return someday as friends rather than prisoners. Catharan tilted his head. You would return to a place that threatened to destroy you? We would return to a place that could become an ally, Vasquez replied. Humanity learned long ago that the species which survives is not always the strongest, but often the one that makes the best friends. Friends? Catharan repeated the word as if tasting something strange. The hegemony does not make friends, we make subjects. And how has that worked out for you? Vasquez asked gently. Catharan said nothing, but his silence spoke volumes. He left without another word. But the conversation lingered in his mind. The hegemony had ruled through force for 12,000 years. It had crushed resistance and demanded obedience. Yet here was a species that refused to be crushed. Not through strength, but through sheer persistence. If fear could not control them, what could? That same night, Captain Vasquez received an unexpected visitor. The ancient crystalline being known as Thros appeared in the corridor outside their cell, moving silently despite its massive form. The other crew members woke instantly, trained reflexes snapping them to alertness. Thros raised a faceted appendage in what might have been a gesture of peace. I wish to speak with you, Captain Vasquez, Thros said, privately if possible. Though your crew may listen if you prefer. Vasquez nodded and approached the barrier. My crew stays, she said. We have no secrets from each other. Thros accepted this with a gentle chime of crystal. I have watched empires rise and fall for 40,000 years. Thros began. I have seen species conquer and species be conquered. And I have learned to recognize the signs of change. What signs do you see now? Vasquez asked. Fractures, Thros answered. The hegemony is not as unified as it appears, and many species chafe under Valeth rule. And your arrival has given them something they have not had in millennia. What have we given them? Hope, Thros said simply. Hope that there are beings in this universe who cannot be broken by fear alone. Dr. Tanaka stepped forward with a question. Are you offering to help us? She asked. Thros made a sound like wind through crystal caves. I am offering information, Thros clarified. What you do with it is your choice. The ancient being explained that the hegemony controlled its subject, species, through a careful balance of terror and dependency. Worlds were kept isolated from each other to prevent alliances. Resources were distributed unevenly to ensure constant competition. Any sign of unity was crushed immediately, but unity cannot be crushed if it arises in the hearts of individuals rather than the actions of groups, Thros continued. And your crew has demonstrated something that resonates with every oppressed being in this empire. What have we demonstrated? Marcus asked. That dignity is not something that can be taken, Thros answered. Only surrendered. The humans exchanged glances. Understanding the weight of those words, Bobby Reyes spoke next. Why are you telling us this? He asked. You are a member of the Conclave, so why risk yourself to help prisoners? Thros was silent for a long moment before answering. Because I remember what the Valeth were before they became conquerors, Thros finally said. They were explorers and scientists and dreamers. And somewhere along the way they forgot that power is not the same as purpose. The crystalline being turned to leave, but paused at the doorway. "You are small and lost and alone," Thros observed, looking back at the humans, "yet you carry yourselves like survivors of something we cannot imagine. So tell me, what are you?" Dardanaka smiled sadly. "We are what is left of everyone who refused to die." She answered. Thros considered those words for a long moment. "Then perhaps you are exactly what this galaxy needs," Thros said. And then the ancient being departed. The humans sat in silence after Thros left, processing everything they had learned. "So there are others who might support us," David said thoughtfully. "Support is not the same as alliance," Vasquez reminded him. "We cannot count on anyone but ourselves." "Story of human history," Marcus muttered in the political chambers above. Catharan made his final argument for extermination. "Every day we delay is another day for these humans to corrupt our subjects with their example," he declared. "We must act decisively." But the conclave remained divided. Some feared the consequences of killing a species that might have allies beyond the wormhole. Others worried that destroying the humans would only prove their point about hegemony brutality, and a few, influenced by Thros's quiet advocacy, wondered if there might be another way. The vote was scheduled for the following morning. The fate of humanity would be decided by beings who had ruled the stars before humans had discovered agriculture. And yet, in their cell, the humans slept peacefully. They had faced worse odds before. They always had. Captain Vasquez woke early and gathered her crew for what might be their final conversation. "Whatever happens today," she said, "I want you all to know that serving with you has been the honor of my life. Are we giving up?" Tommy asked. Vasquez smiled. "Never," she said. "Giving up is not something humans do, but I wanted to say that anyway." The crew nodded, understanding they had no weapons, no allies, and no way home, but they had each other. And they had that stubborn human refusal to accept defeat, whatever came next. They would face it the same way humanity had faced every challenge throughout history, together, with dignity and with absolutely no intention of making it easy for anyone. The Supreme Conclave gathered for what would become the most important vote in 12,000 years of hegemony history. 7 ancient beings sat upon their thrones, each holding the fate of 47 humans in their appendages. High Overseer Catharan stood before them with his final argument prepared. "These creatures represent an existential threat," he declared. "Their resilience, their unity, and their complete immunity to our methods of control make them impossible to integrate. And if we allow them to return home, they will bring others." Thros interrupted with a chime of crystal. "And if we destroy them, we prove that the hegemony can only maintain power through murder," Thros countered. "How many of our subject species are watching this decision, wondering if they are next?" The debate raged for hours. Arguments flew back and forth about security, about precedent, about the nature of power itself in the end. The vote split evenly: 3 for extermination, 3 for release. Thros abstained, forcing a deadlock. "This is unacceptable," Catharan snarled. "A decision must be made." "Then make one," Thros replied calmly. "But remember that the galaxy will remember what you choose." Catharan made his decision. He stormed out of the chamber and transmitted orders to his loyal fleet commanders. If the Conclave would not authorize extermination, he would do it himself. Within hours, a fleet of 50 warships moved toward Facility 7. The humans were about to be quietly eliminated before anyone could stop it. But Catharan had underestimated how far word of the humans had spread. On a dozen worlds throughout the hegemony, oppressed species watched the situation unfold through hidden communication networks. They saw Catharan's fleet moving. They understood what was about to happen, and for the first time in millennia, they decided to act. The humans were awakened by alarms and escorted roughly from their cell. Guards pushed them through corridors toward what they assumed would be an execution chamber. Captain Vasquez kept her crew calm with quiet words and steady confidence. "Remember who we are," she said. "Remember what we have survived." They emerged onto a landing platform where a shuttle waited. Catherine stood beside it with armed soldiers surrounding him. "Your ship has been repaired enough for basic travel," Catherine announced coldly. "You will board this shuttle, return to the Perseverance, and attempt to reach the wormhole." "That sounds like good news," Marcus said cautiously. "Why does it feel like bad news?" Catherine's mandibles clicked with what might have been a smile. "Because my fleet will destroy you before you reach it," he explained. "This way, the Conclave can claim they released you while I ensure you never threaten the hegemony again." "Clever," Vasquez admitted. "Brutal, but clever. I learned from studying your species," Catherine replied. "You are not the only ones capable of ruthless pragmatism." The humans boarded the shuttle without protest. There was no point in fighting. Their only chance was to reach the Perseverance and try to outrun a fleet of warships. With a barely functional exploration vessel, the odds were astronomical. But humans have beaten astronomical odds before. The shuttle docked with the Perseverance, and the crew rushed to their stations. Marcus sprinted to engineering and began coaxing every bit of power from the damaged engines. Amara plotted a course to the wormhole. Calculating the fastest possible route, Bobby prepared the ship's pitiful weapons, knowing they would be useless but unable to do nothing. Captain Vasquez took her command chair and opened a channel to Catherine's flagship. "I want to thank you for repairing our ship," she said calmly. "You are welcome to spend your final moments in gratitude." Catherine replied. The Perseverance accelerated toward the wormhole. Catherine's fleet moved to intercept. The math was simple. The humans would be destroyed long before they reached safety. Then something unexpected happened. A transmission burst across every frequency in the sector, broadcasting to the entire hegemony. Thross's crystalline voice filled the void of space. "Citizens of the hegemony, subjects and rulers alike, I ask you to witness what is about to occur," Thross announced. "High Overseer Catherine intends to destroy armed visitors in violation of Conclave deadlock, and I ask you to watch and remember." Catherine's response was immediate and furious. "This is a military matter and none of your concern." "Thross," he transmitted back, "everything that shapes the future of this empire is my concern." Thross replied, "I have watched for 40,000 years, and I will continue watching." As the fleets closed in on the Perseverance, something remarkable happened. Ships began appearing from nowhere. Not warships, but civilian vessels, cargo haulers, and transports, ships from a dozen subject species, emerging from hiding and positioning themselves between Catherine's fleet and the fleeing humans. They did not attack, they simply stood witness. More ships arrived every minute. Within an hour, over 300 vessels from 12 different species had gathered. None of them fired a weapon. None of them made threats. They simply watched, their presence saying everything that needed to be said. Catherine found himself facing an impossible choice. If he fired on the humans, he would have to destroy hundreds of civilian witnesses. The political fallout would be catastrophic. Rebellions would spark across the hegemony. Everything the Empire had built would begin to crumble. The High Overseer contacted his fleet. "Commanders, stand down," he ordered through clenched mandibles. "Let them pass." The warships parted. A corridor opened to the wormhole. Captain Vasquez stared at her view screen in amazement as the alien armada drifted aside. "They are letting us go." Tommy whispered, "No." Vasquez corrected quietly, "They are choosing not to stop us, and there is a difference." She opened a channel to Catherine's flagship one final time. "High Overseer," she said, I want you to know that this is not a victory. It certainly feels like a defeat. Catharan replied bitterly. It is a beginning, Vasquez said. Come to Earth someday and see what we built from the ashes of every catastrophe. And meet a species that crawled out of ice ages and survived pandemics and endured nuclear fire and still looked up at the stars with hope. She paused, letting her words carry across the void. We are not your enemies, she continued, but we are not your victims either. And we are just stubborn. Catharan said nothing. The Perseverance accelerated toward the wormhole. Thros transmitted one final message to the human vessel. Safe travels. Survivors, the ancient being said. And when you return, bring friends. We always do. Vasquez replied with a smile. The wormhole opened before them like a tunnel of light. The Perseverance entered and vanished from hegemony space behind them. 300 ships from a dozen species remained in formation. They had not fought. They had not rebelled. They had simply stood up, and sometimes that was enough. The journey through the wormhole was rough but survivable. Marcus kept the engines running through sheer force of will and creative profanity. Amara navigated through the chaos with steady hands. The crew held on to their stations and trusted each other. They emerged in familiar space. Earth's sun burned in the distance. Home. The ship's communication system immediately lit up with incoming signals. Defense platforms targeted them. Warning transmissions demanded identification. Captain Vasquez laughed with pure relief and opened a broadcast channel. Houston, Perseverance Actual. She transmitted. We found neighbors, and they're scared of us. She paused, looking at her exhausted but triumphant crew. We should probably talk, she added. The response came within seconds. A mixture of confusion, excitement, and bureaucratic panic. Earth had just learned it was not alone in the universe and somewhere across the galaxy. An empire had learned that humans were exactly as stubborn as they claimed to be. In the weeks that followed, the crew of the Perseverance became the most famous humans in history. Their stories spread across every nation. Their faces appeared on every screen, and their message resonated with everyone who heard it. Humanity was small and young and fragile compared to the empires among the stars, but humanity had never let that stop them. Before, they had faced ice ages and plagues and wars and disasters. They had faced extinction again and again, and every single time they had refused to give up. The galaxy was vast and dangerous and filled with ancient powers, but it had never encountered anything quite like humanity. And now, thanks to one battered ship and 47 stubborn survivors, it never would forget the Perseverance was repaired and upgraded. New ships were built. Training programs expanded, and humanity began preparing for its next journey to the stars. Not as victims, not as conquerors, but as exactly what they had always been. Survivors who refused to stay beaten and who always came back for more.